This is the 10th State of the Nation address by our President, Jacob Zuma.
President Jacob Zuma has approved the deployment of 440
South Africa's president's annual address to Parliament interrupted once again by fighting on the floor.
Bringing the army into this place, the police, and ultimately taking the media away.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're watching The Listening Post. Here are some of the stories we're tracking this week. What the coverage of South Africa's State of the Nation address tells us about the state of the news media there. Now you see it, now you don't. A case of blackmail in Brazil that the government wants kept under wraps. Wikipedia and knowledge in a storm of alternative facts. We sit down with the woman in charge of the Wikimedia Foundation, Catherine Mayer. And if it's America first, who comes in second?
Dear Mr. President, welcome to the Republic of Moldova.
It depends on where you're coming from. When South African President Jacob Zuma delivered his annual State of the Nation address to Parliament February 9th, the force of his political argument was backed by a show of force. Thousands of police officers and hundreds of soldiers were deployed at the Houses of Parliament in Cape Town to help, quote, maintain law and order, unquote. One of the country's main opposition groups, the Economic Freedom Fighters, has taken to hijacking this event to heckle and harangue the president live on television. President Zuma's yearly speech, along with the accompanying opposition theatrics, is one of the few times that the president is depicted in a less than flattering light on the state-owned TV network, the SABC. The SABC is a story in itself. The findings of a parliamentary committee set up to investigate the channel have been damning on issues such as political interference from the Zuma government, financial mismanagement, and much more. With the fireworks in Parliament and the state-owned broadcaster under investigation, we're going to look at the state of the South African media. Our starting point this week is Cape Town. In a way, the political sideshow that now accompanies the annual State of the Nation address is of the president's own making. Because Jacob Zuma moved the speech from its traditional Friday morning slot to 7 p.m., taking South African politics into prime time in search of larger TV audiences. However, the opposition wants those audiences too, and the EFF's penchant for co-opting the event.
An incorrigible man, rotten to the core.
Upstaging the president with its parliamentary antics.
I am speaking. Please take your seat.
Has now been met with an unprecedented show of security that affects the news coverage in and around the Houses of Parliament.
We're not used to that. Parliament has always been a parliament of the people from the era of Nelson Mandela to the presidents who came after him. And then now the use of the soldiers. And it's really intimidating when you see people with big guns and walking around the red carpet. It's very difficult to do your job in a case like that where you can't walk around freely.
So my editor, for example, tried to get out of the media bay in Parliament to follow the economic freedom fighters out to see where the security was taking them, but he and many other journalists were blocked from doing so. They were told that they could not move freely. My other colleagues were outside the House, and they were trying to get pictures of the members of Parliament that were being forcibly removed, and they were prevented from doing so. So this has been a very worrying development. It's something that's never happened before.
The EFF members of Parliament, they know how this game works and they control it.
We're not going to be intimidated by soldiers, by police.
After about an hour or so, they get themselves thrown out. Then they go outside, and they and the other opposition party, the Democratic Alliance leadership as well, they dominate the live coverage from outside Parliament.
Bringing the army into this place, the police, and ultimately taking the media away.
So while the president is making his sonorous address, nobody's engaged in that. Everybody's watching what people are saying outside.
Among the channels covering the story was the SABC, the state-owned broadcaster that since Jacob Zuma took office in 2009 has grown more and more state-controlled. Journalists there say that during the 2014 elections, they were told that 70% of their coverage of the government had to be positive. 2 years later, during local elections, the use of any video of violent protests was reportedly banned, on the orders of executives loyal to Zuma's African National Congress. The SABC story has some familiar aspects, a ruling party interfering with the public broadcaster. What makes it unique, however, is the SABC's odd relationship with private media outlets owned by the Guptas, a wealthy family with close ties to President Zuma. Take the morning after the State of the Nation address, for example. The SABC aired a 100-minute special called The Business Briefing, an event organized by the Gupta's New Age newspaper.
Today we have one of those New Age business briefings, the latest in the series.
The SABC produced the program and aired it, but the commercial revenues reportedly go to the Guptas, whose media outlets are in competition with the SABC, an arrangement that confounds some of the public broadcaster's own journalists.
The relationship between the New Age, which is owned by the Guptas, and the SABC is a long-standing controversy. It's a commercial relationship, but it obviously is also an ideological relationship. And it's the president's friends basically accused or alleged to be feeding off state-owned enterprises like the SABC.
The lines, they are very blurry. But one thing that we do know is that the president religiously goes to these New Age business briefings. The family derives financial benefit from these business briefings. And the most worrying aspect is that the president has virtually cut off contact with the rest of the media community and only focuses on the Gupta-owned media organizations.
For the first part of the program, the president is handled with kid gloves and bats away a series of softball questions with ease. Things change when the program changes channels.
So we're going to have to say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers, but you can carry on watching this. We're going to extend this broadcast on channel 404 on DSTV.
After that switch from one of the SABC's main terrestrial channels to a pay TV channel which far fewer voters watch, the same interviewer, Peter Ndoro, asks much tougher questions, including one on calls for a public inquiry into the Zuma government's alleged misuse of state institutions.
Is this something that you're prioritizing this year?
That it didn't come through the first half, it means that the people missed out on quite an important question that came quite late in the show. I don't know why it came late, whether it was intentional or whether it was deliberate, but the effect of that is that a lower income group of viewers missed out on quite an important question.
I can't guarantee what was in the mind of Peter Ndoro, but there's no doubt we have a great deal of evidence from SABC journalists who've spoken out and say they've been very, very greatly intimidated by the leadership in the corporation and even by people in government who have told them directly, don't antagonize the president, or don't write about this, don't broadcast about that. And so there were plenty of reasons for him to feel intimidated.
Not all SABC journalists can be intimidated. A group of them, called the SABC 8, took their complaints about the network's loss of independence to South Africa's Constitutional Court, a process that led to a parliamentary committee holding hearings on the state of the publicly owned broadcaster.
We marched on the Constitutional Court demanding that we return to the mandate which advocates that South Africa will have and should have a public broadcaster that is upright, well regarded, and a national treasure for all, not for a few.
They're called the SABC 8 because 8 people were fired. And 3 or 4 of them came to the ad hoc committee, spoke out very forcefully. I mean, they were terrific to watch.
Herein lies some of the reasons for my decision to stand up and say no to the reign of terror in the newsroom.
Very specifically, this rule that was imposed on them.
How many buses were burned last night?
That said violent protest can't be broadcast on television. And they said that's absolutely a violation of their mandate. They've got to be able to cover things properly.
In the midst of this crisis, we were dismissed, fired, reinstated, bullied, and we received death threats. We wrote to Parliament to say, please hear us out. We are telling you that the Broadcasting Act lies in shambles. It's a mandate betrayed. So the Parliamentary Committee are going to decide on what the way forward is for South Africa's public broadcaster.
But it's not the findings of the Parliamentary Committee that really count. It's what the Zuma government chooses to do with them. A showdown looms, and the fate of the SABC hangs in the balance. On the download now, our viewers on the state of the news media in South Africa.
There was a time when corruption and other failings in the government were being reported quite a bit, in the sense of Zuma's Nklandla, the Gupta family, and so forth. And media was trying to be silenced by government officials because it was deemed unpatriotic. But as always, journalists are passionate. They are about finding the truth and very much about working with the community now.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week. Brazilians got a glimpse of what looked like major news on February 10th, an apparent attempt to blackmail the president's wife, only to see that story disappear a few hours later at the government's request. The story appeared temporarily in the country's two biggest newspapers, Folha de São Paulo and O Globo, before a court ordered them to take it down, threatening them with fines if they did not. The case of blackmail goes back 6 months and involves a hacker who got into the phone belonging to Marcela Temer, who's married to President Michel Temer, stealing her data and eventually texting her with his blackmail demands. The story and the details behind its disappearance was then made public by The Intercept, the online investigative news portal co-founded by American journalist Glenn Greenwald, who was based in Rio de Janeiro. The Intercept defended its decision to publish the information and described the court ruling as classic censorship of the most dangerous type. Brazilian journalists have also run into some government interference in Venezuela while investigating a story about cross-border corruption. On February 11th, Leandro Stoliar and Gilson Fred Olivier, who work for the Brazilian channel Record TV, were arrested in Maracaibo, west of Caracas, by Venezuelan intelligence officers. They had their equipment confiscated before being deported back to Brazil. That same day, President Nicolas Maduro announced that CNN is meddling in the country's affairs and is no longer welcome there.
Yo quiero a CNN bien lejos de aquí. Fuera CNN de Venezuela. Fuera.
Maduro was reacting to a program that CNN Español aired alleging the Venezuelan embassy in Iraq was selling passports and visas to suspected terrorists. 5 days later, Venezuela's television regulator took CNN Español off the air in what it called a preventative measure. The channel has defended its work. Activists on both sides of the issue, pro and anti-government, have since turned up outside the regulator's offices in Caracas. A handful of reporters and media executives have been arrested in Ivory Coast, alleged to have spread false news about a recent conflict between Ivorian security forces and the government. Last month, soldiers launched a series of mutinies over salary increases that they say were promised but never materialized. As the public prosecutor put it, we have come to believe that certain media organizations are spreading false information in a bid to encourage soldiers to revolt. Among the outlets affected, newspapers Le Temps, Soir Info, Notre Voix, and L'Inter. Moussa Traoré, the head of the National Union of Journalists, said the arrests aimed to humiliate journalists in Ivory Coast. The West African country emerged from 10 years of civil war in 2011 that resulted in the election of the current president, Alassane Ouattara, and the extradition of his predecessor, Laurent Gbagbo, to The Hague, where he is still on trial for crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court. In a world where fact is increasingly treated like fiction and fiction is presented as fact, few online resources have managed to preserve and retain their credibility the way Wikipedia has. The online open-source encyclopedia has become an indispensable reference tool for those in search of information, including journalists. In fact, as our guest in the upcoming interview tells us, behind every Wikipedia page, there is an online newsroom of sorts, populated by volunteer contributors and editors operating with full transparency, researching and referencing every claim to make sure that the content fits the facts. It was a couple of weeks ago that I sat down with Catherine Mayer, who's been executive director of the Wikimedia Foundation for close to a year now, to talk about the methods and standards that make Wikipedia a source that journalists, students, teachers and professionals in all industries feel that they can rely on. We were speaking prior to the decision taken by a group of Wikipedia editors to ban the British newspaper The Daily Mail as a source for the website, citing the paper's reputation for, quote, poor fact-checking, sensationalism, and flat-out fabrication, unquote. In short, fake news. We began our discussion talking about trust, whether that's in the news media or in a source like Wikipedia itself.
Well, Wikipedians have been working on distinguishing fact from fiction for 16 years now. Historically, the big question about Wikipedia is, can you trust it, right? And here we are 16 years in, and based on the number of people who use Wikipedia every single day, I'd say the vast majority of people do trust it. And so we're in this environment now where the question of trust is being reflected back on the media rather than Wikipedia. It's a funny inversion of where things were 15 years ago or so.
What do you think news organizations can learn from your organization in that respect?
I think that news organizations are definitely doing some soul searching right now about how do they open up newsrooms to the public, how do they explain how the sausage gets made, really. Wikipedia does that in every single article that is written. There's a newsroom behind every article. It's called a talk page. It's where Wikipedians get together. It's where they talk through what's notable, what's not, what's factual, what has bias in it, perhaps. And then the thing that is also really different is the platform itself is so transparent. On every Wikipedia page, you can find the citation of where information comes from, and you can see every single edit that has ever been made over time. You know, I don't think most newsrooms are set up to do that.
Some people are scared when they hear that journalists use your kind of encyclopedia. What do you say to those people? What kind of things do they say?
I would say that doctors use us too. Statistically, we are as accurate as the Encyclopedia Britannica ever has been. So, you know, in terms of our accuracy, Wikipedia is very reliable. We would definitely say you should do a little deeper digging if your life depends on it, of course, but as a general place to get context around what's going on in the world, about history, culture, knowledge, Wikipedia is a great place to get started. Hundreds of millions of people use it every single month. It should be no surprise that journalists do too.
Wikipedia is an open source project. It's jealously guarded, I would say, by the 99% and mostly funded by the 99%. You do get some money from foundations, though, and I guess Google kicked in some money. Was it last year or the year before? How reliant are you on the largesse of the 1%?
So we mostly rely on the generosity of people all over the world. Last year, we raised almost all of our operating budget from small dollar donations. That was 5.4 million people who contributed. And now the average donation is about $15, but that starts at $1. And every single dollar for us counts because it's part of our model of independence.
On advertising, you have said, never say never, but no.
That's right.
What does that mean?
That means exactly what it sounds like. So when people say...
That sounds like a political answer.
No, it's a truthful reflection of where we are. We want to be able to be independent of any of these sort of pressures of what advertising might bring, right? So if you look at the way that most models of advertising work on the internet today...
They don't.
Well, it's around driving, you know, clicks and views. And if we were to move in that model, we'd be perhaps chasing those metrics as opposed to doing what it is that we're here to do, which is curate all of the world's knowledge, have people, make it available to people to share in, and have that continue to grow and expand over time. Our mission is to be, you know, the Library of Alexandria, a public park for knowledge, as something that is shared with and owned by the world. And if we get advertising involved in that, who we're serving starts to change.
You told an audience recently that the problem with Wikipedia is that it only works in practice. In theory, it's a total disaster. What does that even mean?
Well, I can't take credit for the quote. It means that if you think about it, how on earth would you build the sum of all knowledge, a free encyclopedia, and make it work, and then make it trustworthy, and then make it comprehensive, and then do it in nearly 300 languages? That does seem like the Tower of Babel, right? A sort of impossible dream. And I think that in that way, Wikipedia is this incredible proof that people can collaborate together to build something that is in the public interest. And the way that they do that is by finding their own niche.
The cynical take would be those people are looking for an element of control as well, aren't they? Is it fair to say that?
I don't think it is fair. I think that Wikipedians edit for a variety of reasons. Some edit because it's an issue that they used to work on professionally, and maybe now they're in retirement and they want to contribute back. Some edit because they are looking to think about how information is presented in the world. So we have a group of editors who have acknowledged or recognized that Wikipedia is pretty imbalanced when it comes to representing women on Wikipedia. Only 16% of our biographies are about women. Well, they want to change that. So people edit for different reasons.
On the question of gender and representation more generally, you have a powerful mission. It's shepherded by hundreds of editors. But when you look at the kinds of people who are most likely to be Wikipedia editors, you see that they're predominantly white, they're predominantly English-speaking, they're predominantly male, from affluent parts of the world. So there's an inherent bias there. And what can you do to combat that?
Well, so it does depend. I think that characterization is true perhaps on English Wikipedia. Of course, that is less true for other languages.
Well, that would be my bias, wouldn't it?
Right, exactly. It is true that generally editing Wikipedia requires a certain amount of leisure time, and the ability to have that time is correlated with people who have a certain degree of economic security and stability. So that does create some exclusion around people who don't have that time or less likely to participate. What we have been doing is trying to identify what the problems are and where the gaps are in order to know what work we have that lies ahead. Because our mission is all knowledge, and that really does require all people.
I'm going to throw another quote at you. You've said, "We know that the web is becoming less open, that privacy is increasingly illusory, that the window for public discourse is narrowing, and that reliable sources for truth are now up for debate." You said earlier that you got to be an optimist to work for an organization like Wikimedia. That doesn't sound terribly optimistic to me. Where do you see hope in that world?
Yeah, that is the first part of what I said. The second part of what I said is that the world is also changing for the better. Information is more accessible than it has ever been. We can call it up no matter where we are at any time. It has made the need for rote memorization less useful. It has made the need for us to be able to engage in critical thinking more useful than ever. And it certainly hasn't changed the need for us to know about the world around us. I think that knowledge is continuing to be created, in fact, at rates that are far greater than have ever been created. This statistic that most knowledge in the world today was created in like the last 5 years. So what we need to do as we pursue the vision that we have is defend the freedom that allowed us to be created in the first place, while recognizing that we now have opportunity to truly actually get close to achieving our mission, which is an incredibly ambitious one.
Do you edit your own Wikipedia page?
No.
Tell me honestly.
No, that would be a violation of our conflict of interest policies.
Can I edit my own Wikipedia page?
No, please don't.
You can't do that?
That would be my recommendation that you don't.
Catherine Marr of the Wikimedia Foundation, Executive Director. Thanks for joining us here at The Listening Post today.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Finally, ever since President Donald Trump told the world that he would put America first, citizens of about 195 other countries have been left to wonder who comes in second. A television show in the Netherlands then had the bright idea of sending a video message to the new president, voiced by a Trump impersonator, urging him to consider the Dutch for the silver medal. The Netherlands welcomes Trump in his own words, now has around 10 million views on YouTube, triggering a host of copycats entitled America First, Switzerland Second, New Zealand Second, Turkey Second. You get the idea. We've got the videos, and we'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Dear Mr. President, welcome to the Republic of Moldova, a glorious country that you've probably never heard about.
You love the art of the deal. Well, this is a country built on great deals. Our government traded some blankets and diseases for an entire country. What a deal.
We invented right-wing populism. It's true. We have the most right-wing populists in all history.
Just like you and Steve Bannon, our president hates the media. Hates. In Turkey, the media is all fake news. It's true.
Here is Iran. Now you might notice this piece of land here. No, it is not a spelling error. It is Iraq. Now it can be really confusing. Which one did I already attack? Which one I'm going to attack next?
You heard about our wall. It's huge. It's a really great wall. It kept out all the Mongolians. Total losers, by the way.
We also have a great wall. And guess what?
we made China build it. It's true, so true.
After America first, can we say Iran before Iraq? That would be great.
But please, put Sweden last. It's so sad. Put them last.